It's just water with sugar and some black color in it. That's what it is. That's Pepsi, man. There's only so many ways you can sell water with sugar, right? Malcolm X, God have mercy on his soul, says that the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent, and that's power because they control the minds of the masses. The media is the most powerful entity on earth. For those that haven't seen this Pepsi commercial with Kendall Jenner, uh, I'll put a link in the description. I suggest you watch it just to know what's going on. But I saw people talking about it in on my Twitter, and then I was like, "Yo, I'm gonna check out what happened," because people were upset. But basically, a gist is there's some type of protest going on. I don't think that the ad makes it clear exactly what it's about, but there's a protest going on in the streets. There's a march. There are kids dancing and chanting and marching, and they've got placards and signs and whatever. There is a apparently Muslim woman in a hijab, who's working on a photography project, and she gets frustrated with her photography project. There's also a man who's playing the cello, and then he also leaves his apartment, and both of them like leave their work and go and join the march. And Kendall Jenner in a blonde wig shooting a is in a modeling shoot, and she's the model. So she sees the crowd going past, and there are like snippets of people drinking Pepsi during the commercial, and she sees the marches going on, and as she's kind of in this whole fake bubble of modeling and posing and whatever, she kind of decides, she makes eye contact with the cello guy, and then she decides to just take her wig off, wipe her lipstick off, and she walks and joins the crowd and marches with them. And then she grabs a can of Pepsi and then goes and hands the Pepsi to a cop who drinks it, and everything's fine, and there's harmony and peace, and everyone's laughing and smiling. And then they end with a caption. People are not happy about this ad, and it's interesting. This has come up before, and the idea of kind of commercializing activism, political activism. And I think that while we can blame corporations for doing this, I think we are also guilty of this. But I'll get to that in a second. Firstly, I think generally the way that advertising has worked for decades is corporations will appeal to the consumer's kind of base desires. Hence why naked women or half naked women sell a car. Has nothing to do with the car, right? But they're appealing to a person's base desires. There are ads about driving that will appeal to this male ego and this idea of masculinity, and how a 4x4 makes you more of a man or whatever. And then there are other types of advertising where um, I don't know, shampoo ads sometimes are very like sexual, things like that. But the idea is that they've been uh, very very kind of focused on aiming and attracting that, what you might call the lower self, and that those kind of base desires that we have, so that we're not thinking from our conscious intellect, but we're thinking from our subconscious or from our desires, and it's easy to be sucked into those things. Now it's like people, because this is happening in other places, like CSR, corporate social responsibility, and the idea of giving back, and the idea of, like, I think Starbucks was going to employ X amount of refugees, and this idea of recycling and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are usually business motives that are contributing to those decisions. It works out business wise. It's profitable to look as though you're giving back to the community. That appears to be profitable. It's profitable to appear to be contributing to sustainable development in areas that you're actually exploiting and ripping apart and stealing resources from and underpaying people, if you make it look like on paper that you're giving back to those communities, that's profitable for you over the long term, because the social consciousness is at a level where they demand that type of transparency and traceability. And so what happens is that corporations and companies will create a mirage or a facade of those things. Not saying that all businesses are like that, and not saying that there aren't businesses that really do play their part and play their role. They do. But I think now more than ever, corporations are beginning to advertise and like it's cool, it's sexy to be an activist. It's sexy now to march. It's sexy to support causes. And the ad very successfully brings together, like, they've got the girl in hijab, they've got the black people, they've got the Asian guy, they've got the white girl. One thing to point out is it's still a white savior thing going on. Not that I'm saying that was a conscious decision. I don't really care. But the illusion of being woke is interesting to me. The fashionability of being woke. And I've said this before to people in conversation, is that this idea of being woke, or what people used to refer to as being conscious. People literally have asked me, are you conscious? Like, I'll perform at places and they'll be like, are you conscious? It's like, what do you mean? Like, as opposed to being asleep? What does that mean, are you conscious? There's this idea that people have that they're woke, that they know what they're talking about, that they support certain causes, that they're activists and so on. But it's very, to me, it's ignorant to think like that. I think thinking that you're woke elucidates your foolishness, because necessarily you're ignorant of the plight of somebody. I can scream and shout about Palestine. I can scream and shout about Syria. I can scream and shout about Black Lives Matter. But I may not care or know of what's going on in Myanmar. Right? So it would be ignorant of me. It would be foolish of me to fuel my ego on the idea of that I'm woke while I'm completely ignorant of that cause. And yes, you're not going to know everything that's going on. You're not going to be aware of every privilege that you have. The idea is to strive to be as much as you can, and the idea is to contribute to causes that you know of, and the idea is to humble yourself enough to know that you don't know, and to not walk around as if you're this conscious person, right? It's very, like, you'll see it in people's Twitter bios and Instagrams and stuff. Everybody has free whatever in their Twitter bio, right? Not saying that's not cool, like, do you in it, but the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of the critique of this ad is on the corporations commercializing and making it cool to be marching and so on and so forth. But we also kind of do that. We make it a kind of a fashionable thing. We make it a badge, or we make it a march even, or we make it a hashtag or whatever. And thus, I guess the businesses will then try to profit off of that and commercial and capitalize off of that. Yeah, man, it's interesting. It's interesting that we would juxtapose sensationalist media with being informed and conscious. And now the idea of being woke or conscious itself is being used as a mechanism of sensationalism. That's very interesting to me. I see this in media, I see this in social media, I see this in art, in music, I see this in poetry and spoken word. Yeah, man. It's interesting, man. It's interesting, but we'll see. we'll see what happens with that. It's just water with sugar and some black color in it. That's what it is. That's Pepsi, man. There's only so many ways you can sell water with sugar, right? And that's not gonna change. So they've got to come up with new ways of doing that. Anyway, see you guys next time.